In the early 1960s, 11 unmarried women in and around Boston were strangled to death. The crimes of the so-called Boston Strangler terrorized the area and captivated the nation. Well, they went unsolved until one man confessed, but his words have always been suspect until now. Terrell Brown is in Boston with the break in this case. Terrell, good morning.
Nora, good morning. 19-year-old Mary Sullivan had just moved into the apartment building behind me just days before she was murdered. She's long been considered the Boston Strangler's last victim, and there was also DNA evidence found here, and that evidence may solve her murder 5 decades later. Between June 1962 and January 1964, 11 women ranging in age from 19 to 85 were found brutally murdered in their homes, many of them sexually assaulted. Later that year, 33-year-old Albert DeSalvo, already in prison for robbery and sexual assault, confessed to the murders. Famed criminal attorney F. Lee Bailey represented DeSalvo.
He wasn't polished or well-educated. He wasn't bright, but he was street smart.
There was no physical evidence linking DeSalvo to the killings besides that confession, and he recanted it just before being stabbed to death by another inmate in 1973. But for many, DeSalvo was guilty.
Now, in most people's eyes, Albert DeSalvo has been known as the Boston Strangler, but without direct evidence linking him, questions and legitimate questions have lingered about that perpetrator.
But one piece of physical evidence remains. In 1964, police found semen on a blanket where Mary Sullivan's body lay.
DNA evidence was undreamt of in the 1960s. But even then, investigators believed that the killer had left biological evidence at the crime scene.
That foresight led investigators to preserve the blanket. But DNA testing wasn't sophisticated enough to draw results until last year, when 2 of only 6 remaining samples were analyzed.
They can do more with less of a sample, and the sensitivity and the techniques that are used today are much different than they were 10 years ago.
Police secretly followed DeSalvo's nephew and grabbed a water bottle he'd thrown away. From that, a DNA match was made for the first time, confirming Albert DeSalvo as Sullivan's killer with 99.9% certainty. News that Mary Sullivan's family had waited decades to hear.
I've lived with Mary's memory every day, my whole life. And it's amazing to me today to understand that people really did care about what happened to my aunt.
Investigators will dig up the body of DeSalvo today to be 100% sure that he is the killer of Mary Sullivan.